Hey guys, welcome to the Field of 68 YouTube channel. If you like what you see here, hit that subscribe button and you'll get more college basketball content just like this. Big East Big Picture. We spent a lot of time on UConn already. We don't have to dive too deep into this, but Providence 2-0. They knocked off Butler in overtime. Butler was pretty impressive to me. They got down 15-0 at the start. They had to fly in this morning because of some plane trouble and still managed to take Providence to overtime in a building where they have only lost 3 times in the last 3 years. But the Providence Friars, 2-0. They're in first place in the Big East right now. How good are they? Are you buying them? Are they a team that can actually challenge for a Big East title in that conference?
No, they won't challenge for a Big East title. But I do think that second tier in the Big East is looking more and more impressive. And by that second tier, I
Mhm.
mean Villanova and Providence. And I think we're getting to that point to where maybe we consider putting Creighton in that second tier. Let's see. They had a bad shooting night by Villanova. Part of it was the matchups of Villanova, right? If you can run them off the line and you have a stretch five who can guard you inside. That's exactly how you attack them. That's what Colorado State did. They had better guard play than Creighton did, better point guard play, and they had a stretch five. So that's the matchup for Creighton. But anyway, I don't. I the last time I was on and when we've talked off air, we've all said, "Hey, we know who those top teams are, and I think we know who the bottom is." Right? We know DePaul's at the bottom. Butler has been thrust kind of in that second tier now all of a sudden. And they're in that group with Providence, I guess, who was like between second and third tier, and Villanova, who had been really disappointing here in the non-conference. Now Villanova looks better. So I think Xavier down there with their injuries towards the bottom, just above DePaul, and then that big mix in the middle, and then at the top, I still think you're going to have UConn, um, where like obviously you lose to Seton Hall. That's a weird one. Uh, and we'll see if they can hang on without clinging. Although, as we pointed out, they play most of the bottom of the league. By the way, did Georgetown fly in day of the game today? What was that? That was among the most pathetic performances I've seen. Like I know Marquette's good. I know Pfizer's hard to play in. I know all that. But I mean, they had some live ball turnovers in transition. They're like, this is like a bad pickup game. It was awful. Um, anyway, I would put PC. I mean, like you ain't going to the dunk and winning games. You're just not. And I'm obviously impressed by Cam English, the 2 kids he brought over from George Mason are outstanding, and they played with great. They were ready to play. I mean, one of the things Matt pointed out is, and it's different when you're playing conference play. I get it, but this is sometimes a hard time of year to get kids ready to play because they sit down and they're out there, especially you're at home, right? Because if you're at home, you're going on the road. You're usually going home afterwards. You look at your phone, you look at your flight, you text a couple people. Like everybody said, "Well, I'm locked in, coach." And then coach walks out and they look at their phone, they're getting ready. That team is ready to play today. That's coaching. Coaching is getting kids ready to play and getting to play their balls off. And I thought Kim did a great job today. So I don't think they're going to compete for the league championship, but I do think that they're a team that the Oklahoma game kind of aside and a couple other non-conference weird ones aside, I think now you got to consider, okay, did the Big East go from 4 teams, maybe a fifth to, wow, this league's getting deeper because of what Nova did at Creighton and what Providence did and how surprising Butler is so far this year.
Matt, Nova is the weirdest one to me because if you look at their resume right now, right, and you just take away everything that happened in in the Big Five, they've beaten Maryland in a game where they were up by like 30. They beat Texas Tech. They beat North Carolina. They beat Memphis in a game where they were up by 30 at one point. They beat UCLA. They beat Creighton in overtime on the road, and their only loss is in overtime at Kansas State. And then you throw in the Big Five stuff. They got beat by Penn. They got smacked by St. Joe's, and they put up 55 points in a dreadful performance against Drexel. What the hell's going on with Villanova, man? Please, can you make some sense of this to me? Because it makes absolutely no sense to me. You're Mr. Positivity. Give me something, man. Give me something here.
What? I feel like every time I'm on with you, we got to talk about Villanova. Every single time you
You
jump
have
on, we
to,
got to
man. They
talk
make
about
no
Villanova.
sense.
I say the same thing. I'm giving the Chris Mack line. They're Jekyll and Hyde. We don't know what we're getting. Um, like we alluded to with Penny Hardaway, Kyle Neptune's in his 3rd year as a head coach. I've said this before too. You have to give him time to figure out his team, to figure out his culture. He went to Fordham. He had a good year, and he kind of rejuvenated Fordham basketball and put some excitement into that program. And all of a sudden, you give him 1 year as a head coach there, right around 500, and all of a sudden, Jay Wright retires, and here's the Villanova job, right? Like, whoa, like, like if I would have gone to the University of Florida after 1 year at Chattanooga, now would it have been a good hire? Sure, we won 29 games my first year. It was easy, right? We were in the NCAA tournament. Everything. Was I ready for that big of a step at that point in time in my career without going through some level of adversity and learning about culture and your team and how to handle situations in your locker room and who's upset, who's all that? Like, there's so much that goes into it. It has such little to do with X's and O's. The X's and O's is the easy piece. And Kyle Neptune's figuring that out, right? I mean, you got a guy like Tyler Burton. We talked about him the other day. You're looking at a guy, when you watched him play at Richmond, he looked like an NBA player, right? He comes down. You can put him in ball screens. He can play. He can create. He's got the size. He makes the jump to Villanova. And if you're recruiting him and you take him in the portal, this is a no-brainer because he's got high character. He's graduated from Richmond. He's done all these things. And you're injecting him in here thinking he's going to be the exact same player, which is just not the case. And he's learning how to manage all that and deal with that. So that's why you've seen him maybe drop some games that they shouldn't have dropped. And it's a very difficult situation for him to take over, even though he's never turning that down. He's got an opportunity to go back to a place that he won a national championship and now be the head coach. But it's hard, and you got to give him time to grow and develop. And I've said it a million times. So I'm just so happy Doug came on here and reiterated my point earlier about Penny Hardaway.
And then here's the other part, Rob. Here's the other part. Here's the other part about the Big Five stuff, right? Okay, everybody in Philly knows the Nova kids. They got a lot of NIL. They're royalty. Okay, and Nova has been running roughshod over the Big Five for a decade. Okay, not those kids in Nova uniforms right now. They haven't done anything. They're a copy of a copy. You guys ever watch Multiplicity? Remember that movie, Multiplicity? And the copy was like shaving his tongue. Right, like they are representing a culture that they are representing a culture they got nothing to do with. Right. So meanwhile, in the Big Five, like we get to play Nova. I want to be Nova. That's a hard deal. Okay, and it's a real thing that this is a real thing with these games is that teams with a lot of NIL, you come out slipping. All those kids, they think they're playing for next year's paycheck. If I impress this coach, I'm going to be on that payroll next year. That's a real thing that they talk about. And I think that's part of it. And then you have you're following God. That's who you're following. You know, it's the job no one should ever take, but you can't turn it down. You are following God. You're following Jay Wright.
No doubt.
Mm-hmm. I just want to know which.
And one last thing. I'm sorry. What Villanova player? I'm sorry.
I just want to know which Villanova player you think is sitting there shaving his tongue. If what?
That was such a great.
No, but the part to it that to me is it's like we have these expectations of Villanova. Remember, like Villanova was a high major school, slipped into like a mid major league. They were ahead of the curve. Remember, they were finishing mid-pack in the old Big East, and then they were dominant. The rest of that league has gotten really good. They've been the rising tide that's lifted all this. So it's not everybody looks at it like in just a vacuum. Well, Kyle Neptune isn't as good as Jay Wright. Well, no, duh. Jay Wright, Jay Wright got better. I played against Jay Wright's team. We beat him when he was at Hofstra. They had 2 pros. We smacked them. They weren't doing all the stuff they do now, backing dudes in and all the culture things they did. Like he got better and learned and became legitimately the best coach in America. But besides that, okay, the rest of that league has gotten really good. And they added UConn in. So I think there's a level of understanding that Rob, you have, that Matt has. I think basketball fans that watch Field I totally understand. But the outside world doesn't. It's that when you're all the way up here, yes, some arrogance creeps in. Then you replace head coach. Everybody thinks that they're the previous guy at the school. All that's part of it. The other part of it is everybody wants a piece of Nova, and everybody's going to be better. Everybody in the league is going to be better. And then in the Big Five, everybody wants a shot at you because not only do they want to beat Nova because you've dominated the Big Five, but they want a piece of that NIL that you got.
Thank you for watching the Field of 68. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, hit that like button, share this link with your friends, or check out the description for some other places that you can consume Field of 68 content.